The faceless ghost followed Julia step by step, each movement a countdown that pressed her deeper into terror. She ran through collapsing halls, breath-tearing, until the shadow raised its weapon for the final strike. Just as despair closed in, a figure emerged, blocking the blow with radiant force. A towering man stood firm, muscles tense like steel, eyes burning with light, his presence cutting through the cold. Behind him, Julia gasped, half certain death had already claimed her. The enemy hissed, mask twisting, realizing the game had shifted. This was no helpless girl anymore. Someone had come to challenge the darkness. My name is Julia, and I never thought wandering off campus could lead me here. I had been restless after hours of study, so I walked further than usual until the streets faded, and I stood before an abandoned motel just outside Denver. The neon sign still buzzed faintly, though no power remained, the letters broken and hanging. Dust clung to the glass doors, graffiti spread across the walls like bruises. Something about the silence pressed down harder than any weight from books. I pushed the entrance open and stepped inside, shoes crunching broken tiles. The air smelled stale, heavy with mold and forgotten stories. I kept telling myself it was just curiosity, yet my chest tightened as though something inside already waited for me. The corridor stretched into darkness, each door ajar as if left in panic years ago. I lifted my glasses, trying to catch details, when a cold breath swept the hallway. At first I thought it was the wind, but then he appeared. A tall man, skin gray like ash, eyes deep pits dripping with black tears. His steps made no sound, yet the floor groaned beneath the weight of his presence. The walls froze, wallpaper stiffening with frost, dust turning into glittering shards of ice. My pulse thundered in my ears, too loud to ignore, and my legs moved before I could think. He drifted closer, movement slow but suffocating, like he was stretching the space itself to keep me from escape. I bolted down the corridor, heart hammering, but each turn only led to more endless hallways. My breath tore in short bursts, lungs burning as the ghost slid effortlessly behind me. Suddenly someone called my name, and I saw Caleb, a friend who had been searching for me, appear at the stairwell. He rushed to pull me, but the faceless shadow slammed a door shut between us. I struck the wood, desperate, until Caleb forced it open. We ran together, sneakers slapping against warped floors, while behind us the figure stretched its arms, shadows clawing for our backs. Just as we thought we reached the exit, the walls bent, the motel flickering, and the floor dissolved beneath our steps like melting film. The air changed, thick with smoke and gunpowder. When I rose, the motel had vanished, replaced by tents, mud, and the cries of soldiers. Bayonets gleamed in the distance, flags torn by wind. Caleb was gone. I realized I had stumbled into the middle of the Civil War. Gravestones lined the nearby hill, fresh soil still dark over the dead. From the smoke emerged the faceless ghost again, unchanged, dragging its shadow across the battlefield. My legs carried me through rows of wooden crosses until I collapsed near an open trench. Then came a figure in black armor, a towering spirit wielding a massive shield. His eyes glowed white, steady and unyielding, standing between me and the thing that would not stop. The clash of their forces cracked the air. The ghost lunged, its body unraveling into long tendrils, but the night blocked with his shield, sparks of pale light scattering like fireflies. I pressed against the earth, shaking, glasses slipping as I struggled to breathe. Every strike rattled the ground, echoing into the night sky. The armored spirit glanced back only once, his face stern, carrying both sorrow and duty. He pushed forward, forcing the monster back into the mist. I rose to follow, desperate not to be left behind, but the earth dragged at my feet as if holding me captive in this era. Even as the ghost broke apart into smoke, I knew I was bound to this time, and the motel was lost forever. I used to think walking away from a nightmare would be simple. You close your eyes, you count to 10, and when you open them again, the world is supposed to fall back into its ordinary rhythm. But when I woke up that morning, lying in damp grass beneath a sky the color of tarnished silver, nothing resembled the familiar. My backpack was gone, my phone useless, and the air tasted heavy like metal. I sat up, brushing dirt from my sleeves, convincing myself I was fine, though my hands shook like I had just run a marathon I did not sign up for. All around me stretched a valley that could have belonged to a different century. Wooden fences leaned crooked, fields rolled toward a distant river, and in the distance stood a town whose rooftops looked too old for this time. I pulled my jacket tighter and began walking, telling myself I had no choice but forward. That is when I noticed her. A woman standing near the fence, dress pale as fog, her gaze locked on me as if she had been expecting someone. Her hair fell straight to her shoulders, eyes unreadable, and for a moment I almost convinced myself she was a living person. But then she vanished, leaving the field empty except for my pounding heart. I had not taken more than 10 steps when a figure came running down the hill. He looked young, perhaps close to my age, his clothes strange yet clean, his voice carrying a steady calm that surprised me. He introduced himself as Thomas, though he did not explain where I was, only that it was dangerous to linger in open ground. His tone was gentle, almost protective, yet there was something in his stare that unsettled me, like he was studying more than speaking. Still, I followed. It was easier than standing alone with the memory of that faceless shadow still clinging to the back of my mind. We reached the edge of the town, and I quickly noticed how silent it felt. No animals, no laughter, only shutters creaking in the wind. Houses leaned close together as if whispering secrets. My footsteps echoed too loudly, and I hated the way people peeked from their windows only to pull the curtains fast. A young woman brushed past us, carrying a basket of herbs, never meeting my eye, lips pressed tight as if words might betray her. I wanted to ask Thomas why everyone seemed afraid, but the way his shoulders stiffened kept me silent. His silence carried a warning louder than anything he could say. When we stopped in front of a small chapel at the far end of the street, the sky deepened, clouds curling low. Thomas told me to step inside while he checked something nearby. The door creaked when I pushed it open, and cold air rushed against my skin. The chapel smelled of old wood and candle wax, though no flame burned. At the altar stood a man I had never seen before, tall, broad-shouldered, cloaked in dark fabric that seemed to gather the dim light. His presence was heavy, but not threatening, more like a shield than a blade. When he turned, I saw eyes bright and clear, almost glowing, and for a second I forgot to breathe. He did not speak, yet his stare anchored me. I felt safer and more afraid all at once, like standing on the edge of a cliff. I knew without words that he was the one who had stood between me and that faceless creature in the motel. My legs trembled, remembering the way the shadow's presence had nearly crushed me. But here, in this silent chapel, that weight lifted slightly. Still, my relief lasted only a moment before I felt it again. A chill crawling through the floorboards, rising like a tide. The air tightened, the walls groaned, and in the reflection of a cracked window, I saw movement. The faceless figure had followed, drawn across time, unwilling to release its prey. The cloaked man raised his arm, light flickering along the shield strapped across it. His stance was steady, grounded like a mountain. The creature lingered at the edge of the doorway, its form bending the air, its gaze fixed only on me. I staggered back, every nerve raw, until my shoulders pressed the wooden pews. My breath came shallow and fast. I thought of running, of leaving them to fight, but my body refused to move. Then Thomas appeared again, bursting through the side door, his face pale, eyes darting between me and the two beings locked in silent confrontation. His voice shook as he urged me to stay behind him, but my trust wavered. Something about his unease told me he knew more than he let on. The creature advanced, and the chapel lights flared as if resisting its presence. The man with the shield stepped forward, unshaken, while Thomas pulled me toward the back exit. My body wanted safety, but my heart told me to stay and watch. I could not look away from the moment. The faceless shadow hissed without sound, a tremor that rippled through the walls, yet the cloaked figure held steady. Their standoff stretched like an eternity in a single heartbeat. When the air finally split, it was not from violence, but from light. A wave burst outward from the shield, flooding the chapel in pale brilliance. I shielded my eyes, stumbling against Thomas, who half dragged me into the street. When the glow faded, silence returned, too sharp, too complete. The man was gone, the creature gone, and the chapel stood empty as though nothing had ever happened. I leaned against the cold stone wall, gasping, trying to hold on to something solid. Thomas looked at me, his expression unreadable, but I caught a flicker of fear he tried to hide. I realized then that he had not rescued me out of kindness. He knew exactly what haunted this place, and somehow he had expected me to walk right into it. That thought lingered heavier than the night air as the clouds thickened overhead. Morning returned without warmth. I woke in a small room above the chapel, lying on a narrow bed that smelled faintly of dried herbs. My body ached as if I had carried something heavy.
In my sleep. For a moment I thought I had dreamed it all, but the silence in the room was too sharp to be ordinary. When I sat up, I noticed a pitcher of water on the table and bread wrapped in cloth. Someone had been here, though the door was locked from the outside. I ate anyway, not out of trust but out of need. Hunger has a way of silencing doubt. When the door opened, it was not Thomas or the cloaked figure, but a woman I had never seen before. She looked older, maybe in her 30s, her hair tied back, her expression calm but guarded. She introduced herself as Alara and said she had been asked to look after me. There was kindness in her voice, though her eyes lingered on me longer than comfort allowed, as if she were studying a puzzle she could not solve. She gave me a cloak to wear and told me the town had questions I might not be ready to answer. I followed her down the stairs into a hall where Thomas waited, arms folded, his face set in a seriousness I had not noticed before. He asked if I had slept well, though the questions sounded more like a test than concern. The cloaked man was absent, yet his presence weighed on the air as if everyone expected him to appear at any moment. A young boy darted past us, carrying a basket of candles, his laughter too sudden in the quiet. I envied him for not knowing the shadow that followed me. We stepped outside and the town looked different in daylight. Children played near the well, women traded cloth and bread, men mended fences. For a brief second, I allowed myself to believe I had been dropped into some rural dream, a place where life was simpler. But then I noticed how quickly people looked away from me, how mothers pulled their children closer, how the laughter fell silent as we passed. I felt like a guest in a story no one wanted to tell out loud. Ilara led us to the council hall, a long wooden building at the center of town. Inside, 4 elders sat at a carved table, their robes heavy with age and meaning. They asked me where I had come from, what I had seen, why the shadow would choose me. I tried to explain, but the words stumbled. How do you describe falling through time, waking in a valley that does not belong to your world, chased by something that wears no face? They listened, but their silence pressed heavier with each sentence. When I finished, they whispered among themselves, then dismissed me with a look I could not read. That evening, Thomas walked with me through the empty fields beyond the town. He spoke little, though I caught fragments of worry in his words. He admitted that the shadow had haunted the valley long before my arrival, appearing only when someone new crossed its path. He would not explain how I had crossed, only that the moment I did, everything changed. His confession left me uneasy. It was not guilt in his eyes, but recognition, as if he had seen this pattern before. We reached the river, and I knelt to wash my hands in the cool water. The current shimmered, reflecting light that seemed too pale for dusk. I looked up and saw a girl across the river, standing among the reeds. She was no older than 15, her dress torn, her hair tangled, her expression vacant. When I blinked, she was gone, leaving only ripples that did not match the calm surface. I asked Thomas if he had seen her, but he said nothing, his jaw tightening. His silence told me enough. She was real once, and she was gone now. That night I could not sleep. I lay awake listening to the wind press against the shutters, to the wooden beams creak under pressure. My thoughts spun back to the cloaked man, the way he had stood in the chapel, steady as if he belonged to some other order of existence. I wondered if he was still out there watching, or if I had been abandoned to the shadow's game. When sleep finally pulled me under, it brought dreams of corridors that bent in circles and whispers that carried no language I understood. I woke before dawn to footsteps outside my door. Not hurried, not hesitant, but deliberate. I pressed against the wall, breath shallow. The handle turned once, twice, then stilled. For a long moment nothing happened, then the sound faded away. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty except for a single mark on the floor, faint and dark, shaped like a hand pressed into the wood. I crouched down, my skin crawling. It had no lines, no features, just the outline of something that should not exist. By morning, Alara urged me to leave the house with her, saying the market would distract my thoughts. The square was alive with color and sound, stalls filled with fruit, spices, woven cloth. For the first time, I almost felt part of their rhythm until I saw him again. The shadow lingered at the far corner, not moving, not solid, only present. No one else reacted. People walked past without seeing, their lives unbroken. But my pulse quickened, my vision narrowing until the world tilted. When I looked back, it was gone. Isrania, but the space it had filled still felt wrong. I returned to the chapel that evening, unable to fight the pull. The door creaked open and the light inside flickered as though it had been waiting. He was there, the cloaked man, standing near the altar, silent as always. Relief and dread tangled in me. I wanted to thank him, demand answers, run away all at once. But I did none of those things. I simply stood, caught between worlds, knowing the shadow had not been defeated, only delayed. And I realized then that survival was no longer about running. It was about understanding why I had been chosen. I never thought silence could feel heavier than words, but that evening proved me wrong. The chapel's dim light barely touched the corners of the room, and I sat with my back against the wall, listening to the wooden beams shift. My hands wouldn't stay still, drumming against my knees as though they could chase away the unease pressing into me. Elora came first, carrying a bowl of stew she insisted I eat. Her kindness was real, yet something about the way she glanced over her shoulder unsettled me. She spoke of her younger brother, a boy who had once vanished near the river at dusk, only to return days later with no memory of where he had been. Her voice trembled as she described it, though her eyes never met mine. Soon after, another figure joined us, a man named Corin. He looked older than Thomas, with streaks of gray in his beard, and the kind of posture that suggested years of carrying burdens without complaint. He studied me for a long time before speaking, as if choosing his words with care. Corin said the shadow had always chosen outsiders, people who crossed some invisible line without knowing. His tone was calm, yet it struck me harder than any accusation. I asked if he believed I could leave, if there was a way back to where I belonged. Corin exchanged a look with Alara, then shook his head. He spoke gently, but his words carried weight. The shadow was not something that followed, it waited. That word lodged in me like a thorn, because I had felt it too. Waiting implied patience, and patience meant inevitability. The cloaked man appeared only once that night. He stood near the doorway, silent as ever, his face hidden, though I felt his gaze cut through the room. No one questioned his arrival. No one asked him to speak. He simply remained there, steady, until the candles burned low. When he finally turned to leave, I almost followed, desperate for answers. But fear held me back. I tried to sleep, but my dreams spun tighter than waking. I wandered corridors that twisted upon themselves, doors opening into the same room again and again. In one dream, I saw the girl by the river, her vacant eyes fixed on me, her lips moving without sound. I woke in a cold sweat, uncertain if I had dreamed her or remembered her. The next morning, Thomas insisted I join him in the fields. He claimed it would help me clear my thoughts, though his own seemed far from clear. As we walked, he pointed to small charms hung from the trees, little carvings bound with string. He explained they were meant to keep the shadow away, though his voice lacked conviction. If they truly worked, why had it come so close to me already? We crossed paths with another woman, younger than Alara, named Saren. She carried baskets of herbs and greeted us with a nervous smile. There was a fleeting kindness in her, yet I noticed how her hands tightened around the basket when her eyes met mine. She asked if I had seen anything strange, her tone casual but her grip betraying her urgency. I said nothing, unwilling to add to her fears. By midday, the town square buzzed with life again, yet I felt like a ghost drifting through it. The stalls brimmed with color, laughter rang out, but every glance that landed on me felt like a reminder. I was the piece that didn't fit. Corin joined us there, his presence commanding quiet even in the chaos. He spoke of an upcoming gathering where decisions would be made. Though he didn't say it outright, I knew those decisions concerned me. That night I lingered at the chapel steps, waiting for the cloaked man. The air smelled of smoke and pine, the kind of scent that clings to your skin. When he arrived, it was sudden, as though he had stepped out of the darkness itself. He said nothing, but I felt the pull of his presence, both terrifying and steadying. I wanted to ask why he had saved me, but the words died before they reached my lips. Instead, he lifted his hand, not in threat but in caution, as if urging me to stay silent. His gaze shifted beyond me, toward the far end of the street. I turned and for an instant saw it, the shadow still and quiet, its outline wavering like smoke against the night. My chest tightened, my breath caught, but when I blinked, it was gone. Only emptiness remained. Ilira found me soon after and scolded me for being alone. She ushered me inside, her hand gripping my arm more firmly than kindness alone could justify. I felt her fear in the pressure of her touch, as though she worried I might vanish before morning. As she guided me to the room, I caught sight of Corin at the far end of the hall, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes heavy with something I couldn't name. When sleep came, it carried me into another vision. I stood in a vast chamber filled with mirrors, each reflecting me, yet none of them whole. Some showed me younger, others older, some with eyes unfamiliar to my own. And in every reflection, behind me, the shadow lingered, never moving, never touching, always there. I woke with the taste of iron in my mouth and the unsettling knowledge that perhaps it wasn't following me at all. Perhaps it was already part of me. I thought the square would feel safer with more people around, but the noise only made my thoughts louder. Children ran between stalls. The air carried scents of baked bread and herbs, yet none of it reached me the way it should have. My skin prickled as if the air itself carried a warning, one I could not name but could not ignore either. Corin stood beside a wooden post, arms folded, eyes fixed on something beyond the crowd. Ilara kept close to me, her words rushed, almost like she wanted to distract me from noticing what he was seeing. When I asked, she brushed it off with a laugh that came too quickly, and for the first time I realized how much she feared letting silence stretch too long. Saren appeared carrying jars of dried roots, her hair tied back, her face set with a kind of determination that seemed older than her years. She greeted me with a nod, but her gaze lingered a fraction too long, as though she wanted to ask me something but couldn't. The weight of their stares gathered until I felt like every step I took was measured and judged. By late afternoon, Thomas arrived with another man I had not met before. He was tall, shoulders squared, with a calmness that made him stand apart. His name was Darren, and though he spoke little, there was an air of quiet authority in how people moved aside when he walked through. When his eyes met mine, I sensed he carried knowledge no one else dared to speak. That evening, the gathering Corin mentioned was held in the chapel. The benches creaked as people filled them, their voices hushed though no one had called for silence. I sat near the front, my palms damp, my chest tightening with every breath. Corin stood to address them, his voice steady, describing the shadow in careful words, though he never named me directly. Still, every eye in that room turned toward me at some point, and I felt their judgment like heat on my skin. I tried to focus on what he was saying, but movement at the back caught my attention. The cloaked man stood in the doorway again, unmoving, his presence filling the space without a sound. No one else seemed startled, no one whispered about him. It was as though he belonged to some unspoken part of their world, and I was the only one still trying to understand. When the meeting ended, people left in silence, avoiding my gaze. Corin approached me, his words measured, telling me I should not be alone tonight. He suggested I stay near the chapel, where the lamps burned longest. I agreed, though my mind churned with questions he never answered. Ilara offered to keep watch with me, her hands twisting the edge of her shawl as though she feared what the night might bring. Hours later, the lamps flickered low. Ilara had dozed against the bench, her breathing steady, but I remained awake, my senses sharp. A faint sound brushed against the walls, softer than footsteps, more like a sigh. I rose slowly, moving toward the entrance, every part of me tensed. Outside, the square lay empty, shadows stretching long across the cobblestones. Then I saw it. Not a form I could describe, not a figure with edges, but a shifting veil in the air, darker than the night itself. My throat tightened as my body refused to move, caught between the instinct to flee and the impossibility of escape. It didn't advance, it only lingered, as though aware of my fear and content to let it grow. A sudden motion broke the stillness. The cloaked man stepped forward from the side of the chapel, placing himself between me and the shadow. His posture was rigid, his presence steady, and for the first time I sensed he was not simply a guardian, but something more, something bound to this place in ways I couldn't understand. The shadow pulsed once, like a ripple across water, then receded into the darkness. Ilara stirred behind me, calling my name, and when I turned back, the man was already gone. Only the echo of his presence remained, heavy in the night air. She asked what I had seen, but the words refused to form, because how could I explain something that felt less like a vision and more like a warning carved into my chest? I barely slept, and when the morning came, the town seemed unchanged. Children played, merchants called out, but beneath